What if I told you that just simply adding one single 30-minute meeting to your calendar could actually decrease your chance of quitting your job by almost 60%?
I mean, that sounds completely counterintuitive, right?
Right. Because usually we think of meetings as like the ultimate enemy of productivity.
Yeah.
We completely dread them. We just sit there counting down the minutes until they finally end.
Oh, absolutely.
Or, on the flip side of that, we're constantly wondering if we're meeting enough, and we end up feeling just totally isolated in our work. It's this universal professional dilemma that spans literally every industry. How often should you actually be meeting with your manager or your supervisor?
Yeah, and it sounds like this basic, scheduling issue on the surface, but it's actually one of the most profound drivers of workplace anxiety today. We are constantly caught between these two massive extremes. On one hand, you've got the feeling of being micromanaged and scrutinized, right? And then on the other hand, you feel like you're just floating out in the void, completely unsupported, just sort of hoping your work actually aligns with what your boss wants.
Just guessing, basically.
Exactly. And striking the mechanical balance between those two extremes is just incredibly difficult if you don't have a blueprint.
And that is exactly what we are building for you today. We have a really dense, just fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We're pulling from massive, modern corporate workplace data sets, including Gallup Research and Google's Rework project.
Some really heavy hitters there.
Yeah, and then we're going to take that corporate data and combine it with some truly brilliant academic research models on thesis supervision. So our mission today is to completely shortcut that painful trial and error process for you. We're going to help you find that perfect science-backed cadence for your one-on-ones so you never feel suffocated, but, you also never get left behind.
It's a great mission.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin finding common ground between, like, a massive tech company and a university library?
Right. Well, we begin by just looking past those surface level differences and really focusing on the underlying human psychology.
Okay.
Because, I mean, a university research lab and a corporate office tower, they seem like entirely different ecosystems. The daily reality of a data analyst at a big tech firm versus, say, a master's student writing a thesis, they're miles apart.
Yeah, totally different worlds.
But the data shows they actually share these incredibly powerful core principles when it comes to human productivity, motivation, and especially psychological safety. Like the fundamental mechanics of how a human brain thrives under guidance, they don't just magically change because your job title does.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. So the framework basically holds up no matter where you sit. Let's start over in the corporate world just to establish a baseline of what modern management data actually tells us about, meeting frequency and employee engagement.
Let's do it.
Because I think the instinct for a lot of people is that fewer meetings automatically equals happier, more productive employees. Like, just leave me alone and let me work.
Right.
Yeah.
Cancel all meetings crowd.
Yeah, exactly. But the data from the Marcus Buckingham Company, which is an ADP company, tells a story that completely shatters that assumption.
It really does. The numbers are frankly startling. Their research reveals that when team leaders check in with their direct reports frequently, employee engagement boosts by a massive 57%.
57%. I mean, that is not a rounding error. That is like the fundamental difference between an employee who is actively scrolling LinkedIn for a new job on a Tuesday afternoon and an employee who is completely dialed in.
Absolutely.
Why is that number so high, though? Like, what is the actual psychological mechanism happening during a frequent check-in that triggers a 57% jump?
Well, it really comes down to intrinsic motivation and the mechanics of recognition. And this is heavily reinforced by Gallup's data, by the way. When you receive weekly feedback, you aren't just getting a dry status update. You're getting these micro-validations that your specific contributions actually matter to the team.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, in an environment with frequent check-ins, employees report feeling seen. They aren't just, a faceless cog in this massive corporate machine. And furthermore, it completely changes how they view their career path.
How so?
Well, think about the physical sensation of driving a car, right?
Yeah.
If you only touch the steering wheel once every 3 months, you're going to feel like you're drifting dangerously.
You need to crash.
Exactly. But when you speak to a manager weekly, you feel like someone is actively co-piloting your trajectory in real time.
That is such a good analogy.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about the traditional corporate structure that so many of us grew up with. The dreaded annual performance review.
Yeah. The worst.
Right. Relying on an annual review is like It's like a sports coach waiting until the very end of a 6-month season to tell a baseball player that they need to adjust their swing in game one.
Right, it's just way too late.
It's totally stale. The player can't travel back in time to fix it, so the feedback is completely unactionable. And frankly, it's a little insulting to the player to have just, like, let them fail for that long.
It is. The modern workplace just moves entirely too fast for delayed feedback loops like that. I mean, you cannot course correct a behavior or a project or a misaligned goal that happened 9 months ago. The damage is already done. The resources are already spent.
So if the annual review is basically a dinosaur, what is the actual sweet spot? Because I'm trying to imagine the logistics of a 57% engagement boost. Are we talking about, like, daily high-intensity stand-ups? Because I'm getting exhausted just thinking about my calendar looking like that.
No, no, no. Daily is almost universally overkill for a true one-on-one development meeting.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, you can breathe easy. The data from Google's Rework project, alongside insights from modern leadership experts like Kim Scott, they point to a very specific optimized window.
Okay, what is it?
30 to 60 minutes, scheduled either every single week or every 2 weeks. That is the scientifically backed corporate default.
Weekly or bi-weekly? Okay.
There is one small exception. Monthly meetings are sometimes deployed, but the research clearly indicates this is more of a defensive tactic.
Defensive, like to protect the manager.
Exactly. Primarily to prevent manager burnout in unusually large teams. Like if a single manager has 20 direct reports, a weekly deep dive is just mathematically impossible.
Right, they'd be doing nothing but meetings.
Right. But if the team size allows it, weekly or bi-weekly is the absolute target.
Okay, I buy the frequency. I totally get it.
Huh.
But I have a major issue with the content.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I've been in those 30-minute weekly check-ins where the manager just, like, pulls up a spreadsheet and monotonously reads down a status list. Like, is project A done? Is project B done?
Ooh,
It feels like a total waste of face-to-face bandwidth.
yeah.
I just sit there thinking, you could have just sent an email for this.
You're completely right. The structure of the meeting is just as critical as the frequency. If you're just doing a verbal email, you are completely wasting the calendar block.
Yes.
But the most effective corporate model highlighted in the sources to fix this exact problem is called the 10-10-10 model.
Okay, break the mechanics of that down for me, because a 30-minute block goes by incredibly fast.
Yeah.
How do you physically fit meaningful development into that tight of a window?
By enforcing strict boundaries. So the first 10 minutes are exclusively dedicated to the employee's topics.
Okay.
The manager is essentially in pure listening mode. What are the employees' current roadblock? Where are they experiencing friction?
Got it.
Then the second 10 minutes belong to the manager for their priorities. So cascading information from upper management, realigning goals, that sort of thing.
Right.
And then the final 10 minutes are the most crucial. They are dedicated entirely to the future. That means career development, long-term aspirations, and skill building.
Oh, wow. The psychology of having the employee go first in those initial 10 minutes is brilliant.
It really is.
Because Caitlin Holloway, she's a former executive at Reddit, she strongly advocates for this in our sources. She actually suggests employees drive the conversation by sharing their talking points in advance.
Yes, send the agenda ahead of time.
It completely flips the power dynamic. It forces the employee to actually take ownership of the meeting and their own career, rather than just showing up like some passive student waiting to be handed a syllabus.
It shifts the entire dynamic from a top-down status interrogation to a collaborative side-by-side coaching session. When the employee speaks first, they dictate the immediate priorities based on their actual on-the-ground experience, which, by the way, the manager might be entirely blind to.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
You're listening to this right now, and your boss is a total micromanager who just loves taking up the whole 30 minutes reading their status list. How do you actually force this 10-10-10 model on them without sounding like you're, trying to do their job?
It's a great question. You introduce it as an experiment to save them time.
Oh, sneaky.
Right. You don't tell a micromanager they're managing wrong. Instead, you say something like, hey, I want to make sure I'm being as efficient as possible with your time. For the next month, I'm going to send over a quick agenda the day before with my roadblocks so we can tackle them immediately.
Ah, I love that.
You slowly train them to accept the first 10 minutes by proving that it makes the rest of the meeting much faster and way more productive.
That is brilliant. Okay, so we've established this ideal structure, the weekly corporate drumbeat. But having a great map doesn't matter if the terrain completely changes.
Right.
Like, A steady weekly rhythm is great for the corporate grind,
Yeah.
where tasks are often pretty cyclical. But what happens when the nature of the work drastically shifts over time? Think about a massive multi-year academic research project.
Yeah.
The weekly default doesn't seem like it would translate perfectly there.
It fails in that environment because the fundamental goal is entirely different. In the corporate world, you are generally executing tasks to drive company metrics. But in academia, particularly at the graduate level, the goal isn't just project execution. The goal is transformation.
Transformation.
Yeah, a master's student is literally learning how to become an independent researcher. A static, one-size-fits-all meeting cadence totally ignores the fact that the student's psychological and tactical needs are constantly evolving.
Which brings us to one of the most visually helpful frameworks in our sources, the U-shaped meeting model for master's students. I want you to literally picture the letter U in your mind right now.
The U-shaped model perfectly tracks the life cycle of complex, novel projects. So at the very beginning of a master's thesis, the student is at the first peak of the U.
High up on the left side.
Exactly. Supervision at this stage needs to be incredibly tight. We're talking often a highly structured one-hour meeting every single week.
Because at that stage, they're usually totally overwhelmed, right? Like they don't know the literature, they're drowning in tactical decisions, and they're basically wandering in a dark forest. They need a guide holding the flashlight.
Exactly that. The heavy guidance prevents early catastrophic missteps. However, as the project progresses and the student grasps the basics, we enter the dip of the U.
The bottom curve.
Right. The supervisor intentionally and dramatically retreats. The meeting frequency might drop to just once every 3 or even 4 weeks.
I love the mechanics of this, but it sounds absolutely terrifying for the student. Suddenly the guide with the flashlight just like wanders off into the woods.
Oh, it is terrifying, but the panic is actually part of the design. The advisor steps back to force the student into the necessary struggle of independent research. They have to wrestle with the data alone to find their own academic voice.
It's like taking the training wheels off a kid's bike.
Yes, exactly.
If the parent just keeps running alongside holding the seat forever, the kid never learns how to balance. The advisor has to let them wobble and, maybe even scrape their knee on a bad draft of a research paper so they can finally find their own center of gravity.
And the advisor is really only watching from a distance, intervening solely if the student is about to veer entirely off a cliff.
Right.
But then we reach the end of the project, the high-stakes writing phase. This is the second peak of the U.
So we go back up.
Yes, the frequency ramps up dramatically. The sources note that during this final push, advisors and students might meet almost every other day.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if I am an employee or a student and my boss says they want to meet with me every other day, I am immediately throwing up red flags.
Sure.
Doesn't that cross the line into toxic micromanagement? Like, how do you physically get any writing done if you are constantly reporting in to your boss?
What's fascinating here is how the intention of the meeting completely shifts. During the final peak of the U, those frequent check-ins are no longer about control or tracking hours or even deep development.
What are they about then?
They are about rapid, surgical feedback. The supervisor is no longer a manager, they're acting as an aggressive editor. When you're under a tight deadline to finalize a thesis, going down the wrong path for even a week can be fatal to the project. The rapid cadence keeps the momentum at absolute maximum velocity.
Well, that reframing changes everything. It's not checking up, it's editing. Now, I do want to contrast that with Ph.D. students, because a master's thesis is a sprint, maybe a year or two. A Ph.D. was a massive, multi-year marathon.
And the marathon requires a different cardiovascular system, so to speak. For Ph.D. students, the sources point to a steady weekly or biweekly standard throughout the entire multi-year journey.
So no U-shape for them.
No, the U-shape is just too volatile for a 5-year project. A Ph.D. student is dealing with such novel, uncharted territory that they could easily spend 3 months going down a completely incorrect, unfruitful research path. The steady, unbroken cadence acts as a guardrail against those massive, months-long wastes of time.
Okay, so we've explored these ideal structures. We've got the steady corporate drumbeat, the academic U-shape, the Ph.D. marathon. But having the perfect schedule on your Google Calendar means absolutely nothing if you refuse to show up.
Very true.
And our sources highlight a massive, universal psychological trap where we actively choose to sabotage these schedules.
It is a behavioral flaw that almost every single professional and academic falls into, and it completely hollows out the value of the one-on-one.
It's called the unstuck fallacy.
Mm.
And I guarantee you have done this. Picture this. You're scheduled to meet with your manager on Thursday morning. It's Wednesday afternoon. You have hit an absolute wall.
Oh, well, we've all been there.
Your code is broken, your client data is a mess, and you feel like you have made zero tangible progress since your last check-in. The anxiety just spikes. So you draft the email, hey, can we push our meeting to next week? I'm still stuck, and I don't really have anything polished to show you.
Right, and from the employee's perspective, it feels deeply responsible. You believe you're respecting their time by not showing up empty-handed. But Professor Gregory Stein at George Mason University argues the exact opposite.
He does.
He states that being stuck is the absolute best, most critical reason to meet.
When you think about the actual utility of a supervisor, canceling a meeting because you're stuck, it's exactly like calling your doctor's office and saying, hey, can we reschedule my appointment for next week? I'm too sick to come in today. Let me wait until I'm healthy.
Exactly.
It is the exact moment you need the specialized intervention the most.
If you are only utilizing your one-on-ones to present polished, finished products and share good news, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the relationship. The meeting is not a performance stage. It is a laboratory for course correction.
Professor Stein introduces this concept of unknown unknowns, which I think gets right to the heart of why we stay stuck.
Yeah, an unknown unknown is a blind spot you don't even know you have.
Right.
Imagine you are building a data dashboard and you're stuck because the numbers look wrong. You might think you just have a small formula error, but a senior manager might look at your messy, half-finished work and immediately realize you are pulling from the entirely wrong database.
Oh, wow.
You could not have known that. By hiding your messy process, you deny the expert the opportunity to spot the foundational error.
You are actively sabotaging your own timeline out of pride. And beyond just the work, what does that avoidance do to the human relationship? When you constantly cancel meetings because things aren't perfect, you are eroding the foundation of trust.
Absolutely.
Consistency is what builds psychological safety. By canceling, you are silently signaling to your boss that it is not safe for you to be vulnerable or to ask for help when you're struggling.
It creates a culture of hidden failures, which is literally the fastest way to derail a team.
Okay, let's ground this in reality, though. If we agree that we must consistently communicate even when we are totally stuck, how do we physically do that without just clogging up our calendars? Because if I'm stuck on 3 different things and I demand a face-to-face meeting for all of them, my calendar is going to be a nightmare of bloat.
That is a very real logistical friction, and Professor Stein offers a specific mitigation tactic for this. If you are in a phase of work where you go more than a week without an in-depth face-to-face meeting, you must send a short, asynchronous written status update.
So we're talking about a quick pulse check, not a 5-page report.
Exactly. Just a few crisp bullet points. Here is what I accomplished. Here is exactly where I am stuck. Here is my proposed next step.
Simple.
The supervisor can skim this in 2 minutes, spot any massive unknown unknowns, and only trigger a synchronous meeting if a real intervention is required.
It's all about leveraging asynchronous tools to decouple the feedback from the physical meeting room. And the sources provided a brilliant, highly technical example of this from the academic world involving thesis supervisors.
Ah, yes, the shared Git repository. Now, it is a technical workflow used in computer science and mathematics, but the underlying principle is an absolute masterclass in asynchronous management.
Wait, for those of us who do not write code for a living, what does a shared Git repository and a separate branch actually mean in plain English? Are we talking about like a glorified Google Doc with track changes?
Think of it as a Google Doc with track changes on absolute steroids. So the student is writing that highly complex thesis. Instead of printing out pages or emailing versions back and forth, they save their work in this shared system.
Okay.
The supervisor can log in at midnight on a Tuesday, look at the student's work, and create a branch, which is essentially a parallel universe of the document.
A parallel universe. I like that.
Right, so the supervisor makes edits, writes code suggestions, and leaves notes in this parallel universe without actually destroying or altering the student's original work. Then the student logs in the next morning, reviews the parallel universe, and merges the good advice into their main project.
So they are deep in the weeds together, actively tearing apart the work and collaborating, but they never actually had to coordinate their calendars to be in the same room at the same time.
Exactly. And because they maintain that incredibly tight asynchronous feedback loop, the sources note that these pairs often only need to meet face-to-face once a month.
Oh, wow. And if we connect this back to the corporate 10-10-10 model from earlier, this solves a huge problem.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, it is the missing puzzle piece. If you handle all of your tactical day-to-day work updates asynchronously, via those quick bulleted emails or shared software, then when you finally do sit down face-to-face for your 30 minutes, you do not need to waste a single second reading a status list.
Which protects the final 10 minutes of the 10-10-10 model.
Yes, it ensures you always have the bandwidth for the big picture. You can actually spend that precious face-to-face time discussing long horizon goals, career trajectory, and emotional alignment because the small stuff is already handled.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look at this entire stack of sources, from the 57% engagement boosts in corporate data to the U-shaped academic frameworks, what are the actual rules for you to take back to your own calendar tomorrow morning?
Well, first,
You have to kill the unstuck fallacy. Never cancel a check-in just because you're struggling. That roadblock is the very reason the meeting exists.
Yeah.
Second, recognize that consistency is the bedrock of trust. Keep the cadence, even if it is just a brief asynchronous pulse check. Third, take ownership of the agenda. Do not be a passive participant waiting to be managed.
Right.
And finally, push the tactical updates to asynchronous channels so you always fiercely protect room for your long-term career development.
Taking ownership of how and when you communicate is one of the most vital professional leaps you can make. But, as we synthesize all this data about trust, psychological safety, and the exposure of blind spots, this raises an important question.
Lay it on me.
Well, the sources definitively prove that these regular meetings keep tasks on track and prevent catastrophic errors. But if you stripped away all the actual work updates, like if you removed the task lists, the project tracking, the thesis editing, the code reviews, if you took all of that away, would the one-on-one meeting still hold intrinsic value purely as a mechanism for human alignment?
Wow.
Right. Is all of the actual work we discussed just an excuse to establish connection and trust with another human being?
That fundamentally flips how we look at our calendars. Is the work just an excuse for the connection? I love that perspective to close on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Take a hard look at your calendar, rethink your cadence, and please, never cancel when you're stuck. Catch you next.